Okay, everything to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a cool update for you from Islander Watches. A little bit about the brand. After many years as an online dealer via Long Island Watch, the owner Mark decided to start having his own models produced. With an initial focus on essentially providing ready-made Seiko Mod style timepieces that are actually compatible with existing aftermarket Seiko Mod parts for corresponding models, such as bracelets, bezels, and crystals, etc. Now has expanded into more original designs, which I'm really excited about. In terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design when you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically some type of screw down crown. You want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. This is their Port Jefferson skin diver, and it's their thinnest diver to date at just 11 millimeters thick, or you could consider the 11.5 millimeters at the absolute apex of the crystal. It'll easily fit under a shirt cuff, for really versatile everyday wear, which is fantastic. Also, this has a really strong price point at only $415 direct. So very, very impressive. I really like this genre of kind of bringing back the thin skin diver. And they really knocked it out of the park with this one. I'm really excited about it. I think they probably could have even gone a little bit more high end with it and charged more. But I think in terms of value proposition, they really know a sweet spot within the market, and I would expect nothing less from Mark because, hey, he sells watches all day long from various different brands. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. I love this color combination. He calls it a sun-faded orange. I think this is borderline salmon-y tone to me, and I really love kind of the play of blue and salmon. And then you get into some of these details, and I really enjoy that it's not just very vintage-esque. There's a lot of modern elements, not just modern materials. Of course, they do have that ceramic bezel insert, but the execution on these 3D applied markers, if you look at that, those are just loom blocks, which is really cool. And then you actually have some old school classic design elements like that brushed chapter ring that sits there, almost creating kind of a railroad track effect. And then all of it, of course, is contrasting off of that glorious kind of semi-matte dial, which is a really beautiful tone and hue. And honestly, it's a bit, you can see compared to the underneath of my hand, it's a bit skin tone. So I mean, this is something that will not have any issues kind of matching when being worn by a human. So the dimensions are really nice on this. 40 millimeter diameter, 11.5 millimeters in total height, but you can see some of it is just that slight crystal bumping out. So it's visually going to be quite thin, and they do a really fine job of that. The lug to lug is 48 millimeters, so not super small, but definitely not long. So I think that really just adds to just the versatility of it. So if you have a larger wrist, this isn't going to be something that feels undersized, and if you have a smaller wrist, it's not going to be overwhelming. Now, the crystal is a single dome sapphire with inner AR coating. You can see that if you get it at a very harsh angle there, you're going to have a little bit of distortion, a little visual play. Some people really enjoy that, and underwater, it kind of doesn't matter. But on your wrist here, you can still see very legible, even at this harsh of an angle. It's really only until you break down to here where you're getting that distortion. So for me, this is pretty balanced. It's giving you enough visual play without actually hindering functionality. So another thumbs up for that. Getting into the bezel action, it's 120 clicks. Ooh. Nice rotating bezel. Nice and clicky while still being smooth. The bezel grips themselves are really nicely defined. As you can see there, nice and sharp, but not sharp in a way that's like feels unfinished. It's sharp in a way that feels very precise. So another big plus point there. One thing though, of course, when you do have that glossy ceramic, you touch it and it picks up fingerprints. So that's a bit of a trade-off, but you do get something that is always going to be looking new, glossy, which, hey, a lot of folks really enjoy, especially if they're going to be spending money. They want something to look newer, longer. Especially if you don't have a huge collection of watches, and maybe this is going to get a lot of daily wear. So the crown is signed and screw down, and it is really nicely proportioned, really easy to grip, and you can see it just flows right in terms of the proportions. I really do enjoy that. The movement inside that you can't see through this 3D embossed stamped case back is your Miyota 9015, which explains the thinness. You have a thin movement in a thin watch. I dig that. It's just kind of sad to see sometimes people take this very thin movement and wrap it in this bulky watch frame. So it's nice to see that, it was more from the early planning to the execution, that thinness was something that they kept in mind and executed really well on. Then getting into those dial details, again, you get that semi-matte kind of salmon dial with applied markers. You get that date at 6 o'clock, black numerals over a color matched disc. So very nice, not disruptive at all. You get polished hands with painted accents as well as Loom. You can see the details on these hands are something else. Check that out. Ooh, if I can get it to focus. They're actually multi-finished, and they do also have that painted center line, which adds contrast. So you're getting contrast in finish, getting contrast in color. So this is going to give you, again, something that is highly legible, and it's just really thoughtfully executed. So I do appreciate that as well. The Loom isn't specified from what I could see in the specs, but it does glow green, so I'm looking forward to showing you guys that when we get to the Loom shots. The water resistance, only 150 meters, but from me, for this type of watch, I feel like 150 meters is the sweet spot. I would much rather have a thinner 150 meter diver than a thicker 200 meter diver. At the end of the day, hey, let's just get this thing as thin as we can, just because that's something that we haven't really seen. And not just thin for the sake of thinness, but thin in a profile that is really well balanced and versatile. So I dig that. Getting into the bracelets, 20 millimeter lug width, so it's going to be easily changeable. You do have solid links and end links. I will say that this beads of rice bracelet is not fully articulated. These center sections are not individual beads of rice, unfortunately, so the articulation isn't quite as nice as some other, well, let me give it a quick wipe here, as some other beads of rice bracelets on the market, but typically those beads of rice bracelets are on more expensive watches, so it makes sense that there was, some level of cost saving that was done here. Visually though, these are going to present as really, really nice. I will just say that the actual articulation isn't quite as strong, but again, this watch goes for $415, so that seems like a bit of a nitpick, right? It's not some, hey, this is a line in the sand we can't cross. Now, getting into the pins, they actually are screw in and really impressive in terms of the tolerances because you have flush fitment. Check that out. Look at the screw, not sunk in, not sticking out, just perfectly flush, and it's only on one side. So that shows a certain level of precision that the factory that's producing these can do. So that is really, really impressive. I have to throw that out there. And these are larger screws too, which mean that it's going to be easier for you not to ding these up and strip them out. So very thoughtful. And again, that's very, very impressive. And when I see this, it makes me believe that the same factory probably could have done something a little bit more extravagant with the center links here and made these individual, links versus it being kind of a single link. It's kind of just a fixed link here, like a Y shape, but it is very, very nice visually. Again, it's down to the touch, so that's something, hey, while it's on your wrist, you're not going to be running your fingers over it and feeling, so not as big a deal as it is for me as a reviewer, for somebody who's just going to wear the watch and enjoy it. So Won't take it too far down that road. It does have a nice 2mm taper down to 18mm at the clasp. It does have a stamped push button double locking clasp with a milled folding section. So very nice. That's where I need it, where I want it milled is right there. I don't mind too much about this section being stamped, especially if it flows with the bracelet itself, which it does. It doesn't stick out. I mean, if they did something milled, there would be a little bit of overhang because this isn't a dramatically tapering bracelet. But if they did want to make this a little bit more high market, Mark, if you're listening, I think adding more of a taper, you taper this from down to basically 20mm instead of going to 18. I say taper it down to 16mm, have these individually milled out, and then do an 18mm milled clasp with some toolless micro adjust. Maybe use that Node X buckle, which I believe they're licensing out to different different makers out there, and that could be but that's if you want to sell this thing for $700-800, right? And maybe you don't want to do that. That's fair. Yeah, not everybody's willing to pay double the price, when you start getting into that. So that's something to think about. Also, as consumers, guys, we always ask so much, but then there's a cost to all of that. And then you have to think about where that tier puts it in with the competition on the market. And I think right now this is very class leading in where it's at. It's just visually, I could see that there's more ceiling there if they would to take it up a notch. But that's just my personal opinion. So let's go ahead and actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this thing wears gorgeously. Of course, if I get it a little too close to the camera there's going to be some lens distortion. It's going to appear a little oversized. So what I'll do is I'll keep my hand nice and low and then just kind of tighten up the shot so you guys can get a nicer look at the details while still getting a truer aspect ratio of how it will visually render on your own wrist. Some things I do enjoy, check out the brushing there. It actually matches in terms of the direction for that end link. Those little details do matter. Beautiful high polished bevels there. Again, very nice. I will say the links, while they're on, are quite comfortable, but to the touch themselves, they can feel a bit sharp. Again, I don't think to the level of it feeling underfinished sharp, but if they did want to, again, if there was another world where they wanted to pay double or charge double for this watch, I would definitely put some bevels on there and just kind of break those edges down to give a more premium feel along with that fully articulated bracelet. If they ever wanted to do that, which, Mark has so many great ideas from terms of design language. If he wanted to make a watch that costed that much, he would just make it. He probably wouldn't, jazz up an existing model. But yeah, again, this one, I really love the look. I love the theme. I know this is something that Mark and I had actually discussed via DM. A watch that I've really wanted to make for a while, kind of out of my own head, was a thin skin diver style of watch, super versatile, kind of, boardroom to the beach theme. And, one of the things was, having it be 150 meters of water resistance. I feel like 100 is just too standard, while 150 just strikes this kind of vintage look. Honestly, there were so many cool 150-meter watches, for a very small period of time that were divers. Now, of course, 200 is really the standard, but if you put a screw-down crown and 150 meters of water resistance, it's really going to be everything that you need, and that's something I think he really did accomplish well with this piece. The Port Jefferson skin diver, this thing is very cool. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, check that out. You even get the loomed Islander logo. Holy smokes. I really, really like the way that they did this execution. Again, it has those classic vibes to it, but then they're injecting the modern, and again, not just modern materials, but actual modern design language too. The way that the loom plots are 3D, hyper bright, and this adds this extra bit of dimension. And then even in the unconventional way that the loom is shaped, right? You're getting that U-shaped loom versus it being an indice that is full of loom or topped with loom. So again, it's just little smart things like that that you see from enthusiast-run brands, where I really do give Mark so much credit, because he followed the steps. He did it right. Like, hey, make a couple of homage watches, even if they're an homage to Seiko mods. Build up that build up all of that knowledge, learn, and then you can start executing some wilder stuff that is more. Oh, look at that. You can see a little bit more of the orange, right? That sun faded orange in the dial with this loom shot, low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of a building, walking underneath an overhang, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to maybe even include some harsh lighting that could typically expose any type of production defects. But you can see this thing is just outstanding. Very, very cool. Look at that dial. It just has so much visibility. Look at that. Then you start, I mean, even the dark spaces on the dial help with contrast. So just really smartly done. So I was really excited. Reached out to Mark when I saw this, and I was like, dude, let me feature this thing. This thing is cool. He sent one over. I'm sure it's just a loaner. I'll have to send it back. I'll be sad. I will be sad too, because this is actually a very fun watch that I think could dress up really, really nicely because of that design. I mean, you think about, you put this on a really nice blue sailcloth strap, maybe one of those Artem ones that I've reviewed in the past. Whew, this thing would look like $1,000,000. It has that in it, which I think is really cool. I like that the blue on the seconds hand isn't overly matchy. It has a little fade to it as well. I like that the dial, I mean, you think about blue and orange, of course those colors go together. And then this is, verging on that kind of salmon space. So again, it's a cool color palette that I think, you can take a chance with, that you don't necessarily need to be like looking for a pink dial watch. You could just be looking for a great diver, right? That has high legibility, that is a mixture of kind of dressy and functional, that is a mixture of vintage inspired and modernly executed. So there's a lot to enjoy here. This one's a cool one. No, this isn't a paid advertisement. I'm just giving you my honest admiration for a guy who's really accomplished a lot within this industry, and he's living the dream. So that is pretty cool. So closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, wears nice and flat with a slim classic profile. In terms of model variants, definitely check their site for current options and availability. In terms of comparable models, value to quality, when you think about that ratio, this is similar, to some of the stronger factory brands that are out there, but with a more classic and original design aesthetic, right? Less derivative, right? So yes, there are brands that are able to offer these components and this level of finish at this price point that are out there, but are they offering a refined and original looking aesthetic like you're going to get here? And I would say it's a rare thing. So for that alone, I will give Mark even more bonus points, kind of above some of the things out there that you might find for brands that are dealing in a lot larger scale with even smaller overhead, because they're working straight out of a factory and they're just slapping on, their logo onto an existing design or a parody of an existing design. So bottom line here, guys, I just love the theme and the aesthetic of the Port Jeff, and I'm genuinely impressed with the execution at under $500. Mark continues to bring enthusiast targeted watches to the market across an array of different styles and genres, while still keeping both value and quality a constant across the entire Islander lineup. And this is cool. I love that he kind of has this watch that is really praiseworthy, that isn't even his most expensive or dynamic watch. It's just a cool middle range watch that I could see a lot of cool middle range collectors really enjoying. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.